A good moed, modim la simcha. It's great to be learning with you here in the intermediate days of Pesach. How's everybody doing? Got another spectacular daf today. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire, Paula in Chicago, Ryan in Florida, Duffy in Asheville, Pam from Oregon, Ella says shalom, Marjorie in Georgia, Lynn wishing everyone a good mud from North Texas. Welcome, welcome everybody. I'd like to dedicate today's show to our good friend Seth Glass. He passed away on Shabbos, and we attended his funeral today at Mount Sinai Cemetery in Simi Valley. What a moving event. Seth was a really gifted musician. He actually played with Shlomo Carlebach back in the day. He's also a songwriter. I just saw that somebody just put his album up on YouTube. There's a song that they played at the funeral that is so nice, so pretty. Sweet Shabbos Wine by Seth Glass. If you Google that, you can actually find the whole album that it's taken from. And Andy Statman and Peter Himmelman played on that album. And in addition to being a gifted musician, Seth was a seeker, a poet, a mystic, a traveler. Remarked on the bad jokes he liked to tell. I didn't think they were so bad. But a really, really special individual. He'll be sorely missed. He went to bed. He was 64 years old on Shabbos of Passover, and he didn't wake up. I mean, if you have to go, not the worst way to go. But he left a hole in this world. I mean, you know, you really learn something. I knew him well. I knew him for years, but I learned so much about him at the funeral and the stories that his sisters told and how much they miss him. I mean, he just was such a giving soul and made such an emotional impact on so many people. And I'd like to share with you a little bit of Torah that he shared with me. And what's interesting about this is that he got it from me, but I didn't realize how good it was until he reflected it back to me. I kind of missed how great it was. I once gave a talk on what is holiness. What is Kedusha? I mean, the word holy comes up just thousands of times in scripture and literature, and it's kind of like a given. You know, we talk about God as the Holy One, blessed be He. But what exactly is holiness? And the word Kedusha is you know, in English, the word holy is related to the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, and this idea of wholeness, right? That something is whole. But in Hebrew, it comes from kadosh, which means to set aside, to separate. Things that are holy are separated from everything else, elevated above, made sacrosanct, consecrated. Right, but this idea that what is sacred, what is holy, is that which is set apart. So in that piece that I wrote, just one of the points that I made is that when the angels, in Isaiah's vision of the angels in heaven, which we recapitulate, in fact, during Passover every day. I mean, we do it every day. What am I talking about? We do it every day. It's part of the Shemona Esrei. When the Chazan, when the cantor does his repetition aloud of the Amidah, of the Shemona Esrei, the standing prayer, the basic prayer, we say it 3 times a day, but only twice a day when it's said aloud and in the presence of a minyan, do we recite holy, 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 kadosh, 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 is the Lord God of hosts, right? And Seth told me that he was bothered by this passage. For years, he was bothered by it. As a musician, as a gifted musician, why was he bothered that the angels in heaven are singing to God, holy, holy, holy? Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it wonderful? You know, to Seth, how wonderful is it that God created a whole bunch of angels to just tell him that he's so holy? God knows he's holy. God is the source of holiness. And so it didn't sit quite right with Seth until he read this piece where I brought down a teaching of the Radak, R-A-D-A-K, right? It's an acronym for, it's Rabbi, I think it's Adam Kamhi, right? I can't remember his name exactly, but the Radak, who said that the first two of those three words, right? Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. But the first two, the angels are not singing to God. They're singing to each other, right? So and we know that because it says that in the lead up to that, and we say in the morning prayers all the time, that the angels call out to one another, right? Meaning that they call to one another, Holy One, right? Kadosh means holy. You can also translate it as not just holy as an adjective, but as a noun, Holy One, right? A person or an angel or a being can be a Kadosh, be a Holy One. So the angels are saying to the angel on your right, Kadosh, Holy One. And to the angel on your left, Holy One, Kadosh, right? That we can't have the heavenly choir singing God's praise together until each individual acknowledges the individuals around him, right? Like you wouldn't be in a band and not have a relationship with your bandmates, right? So when the holy ones praise God, first they acknowledge and praise each other, right? Not because they're above God in some way, but they say, let's do this together, right? Let's do this together. And we know that's true because you can't sing the Kedusha without a minyan. It has to be done with a group or we don't do it, right? So you have to acknowledge your brothers and sisters around you, right? You acknowledge, Holy One, Holy One. Let us acknowledge God's holiness, right? Let's do this together. And what a beautiful legacy that Seth left. This idea that when we make music, when we sing songs of praise, when we approach the holiness of God, we do it in company. We do it by acknowledging the holiness of the people around us. So much of what we need to do is connect, with the people around us. That way we understand ourselves better, we understand them better, and we can create unison and harmony, and then we're ready to give God the praise that he deserves. Or if we just approach this as all of us individuals trying to understand God's holiness on our own, holy, 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 it's not going to be nearly what we can give to God if we do it acknowledging each other and then working together to elevate that praise to the Holy One above. Seth, we miss you. We love you. Your legacy is something that is only beginning to get out there in the world. You touch so many lives, and we dedicate our learning to you today here, Sota, page 9, and AT Daily, to the memory, the beautiful memory of our friend Seth Glass. Okay, let's do this. So this is indeed Sota Daf Tes, Sota page 9. We are in chapter 1. Today, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 5, and we're going to get into Mishnah number 6 as well. Generally speaking, these are the laws of the Sota procedure. The suspected adulteress who was warned by her husband, do not seclude yourself with some man. And then she secluded herself with that man. And she was warned in the presence of two witnesses. And she secluded herself in the presence of two witnesses for enough time that if they were going to commit adultery, they could have done it. And then the husband and wife become prohibited to each other until she drinks the bitter water to prove her innocence. And then they're allowed to go back together and form a beautiful couple again. But if she won't drink, or if she is guilty, she committed adultery, they're going to have to divorce. En route to understanding this procedure, we're actually having a lot of beautiful digressions, talking about principles of love and togetherness and stories from the Bible, and that is going to continue today. Very interesting pseudo-digression type teachings. Okay, so yesterday, right, the yesterday's show was called by that which you measure others, you will be measured. And that theme is going to continue today, right? So the Gemara questions the need for two verses. We picked this up a few paragraphs down on page 9a. And the Gemara questions the need for two verses to indicate that small transgressions are addressed through one significant punishment. This idea that we saw late on yesterday's daf, that you might get away with little transgressions for a long time and think, oh, maybe God doesn't punish measure for measure, and I'm not going to be held accountable for all my little transgressions. But the sages say we're going to be held accountable for everything. Everything good that we did, there'll be a reward. And everything bad that we did, we will be held accountable. And perhaps it will all be added up at the end when the punishment is meted out in one large chunk. Oy. Right? So, and since Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, the redactor of the Mishnah, derives that small transgressions are combined and punished together. And where does he derive this? He derives it from Ecclesiastes 7:27. Behold, this have I found, says Kohelet, the narrator in Ecclesiastes, right, which we understood to be written by King Solomon. So then why do I need the verse from Isaiah 9:4 for every boot stamped with fierceness, right? These seem to be two sources teaching the same idea, that all the little transgressions will be punished with one big punishment at the end of one's life. And the Gemara answers, this verse serves to teach that even small transgressions are punished by the measure, i.e. with a punishment appropriate to the transgression. And the Gemara asks, and since he derives it from every boot stamped with fierceness, like every boot, right, every misdeed is going to have its own fierce retribution. So why do I need in full measure, when you send her away, you contend with her, from Isaiah 27:8? And the Gemara answers, this verse serves to teach the statement as taught by Rav Chinana Bar Papa. For Rav Chinana Bar Papa says, the Holy One, blessed be He, does not punish a nation deserving of punishment until it's time to be banished, i.e. until the time of its final eradication from the world. As it is stated, in full measure, when you send her away, you contend with her. Right? Like Rome got away with a lot, and eventually Rome disappeared from the world as a civilization. Same with the ancient Greek civilization, the ancient Egyptian civilization, the Babylonian civilization. There are still people living in the lands where those civilizations existed, but we see no we see no living embodiment of Rome, right? There's just some ancient ruins. But we wouldn't say that Italy, is the modern equivalent of Rome, so ancient Rome disappeared. And so when Rome finally fell is when all the, the retribution came to it for the wrongs that it had done for centuries. But is that so? But didn't Rava say, why are there specifically 3 cups of misfortune that are stated with regard to Egypt in the dream of its chief butler, right? The chief butler was the one who was imprisoned alongside Joseph, the cupbearer and the butler, and they both had dreams that Joseph was able to. The cupbearer and the baker, and they both had dreams that Joseph was able to interpret, that one of them would be restored to his position in 3 days and the other one would be beheaded in 3 days. He interpreted correctly, and the cupbearer remembered that later when Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret. So, with regard to the 3 cups of misfortune that are stated with regard, and so homiletically we interpret that these 3 cups wasn't just in the dream of the cupbearer who was alongside Joseph, but that actually this dream, which is mentioned in the Torah, had a greater significance that had to do with the entire Egyptian civilization. Right? So they are an allusion to the 3 cups of misfortune that would later befall the Egyptian nation. One, that it drank in the days of Moses during the 10 plagues and the Exodus, right? They suffered for enslaving the Jewish people. Another, that it drank in the days of Pharaoh Necho, the king of Egypt, who was defeated by Nebuchadnezzar, who also destroyed the first temple. And one, that Egypt will drink in the future along with its companions, i.e. the other nations, when they are punished during the days of Mashiach, the Messiah. They'll be punished, for all the wrongs and the suffering they imposed on the Jews. and other innocents. And this indicates that nations can be punished several times, not only when they are eradicated. And if you would say that those ancient Egyptians have gone and these later Egyptians are different people, but isn't it taught in a Baraisa in the Tosefta that Rabbi Yehuda said, Minyamin, an Egyptian convert, was a friend of mine from among the students of Rabbi Akiva. And Minyamin the Egyptian said, after I converted, I was a first-generation Egyptian convert. And so I married another first-generation Egyptian convert. I will marry off my son, who is a second-generation Egyptian convert, to another second-generation Egyptian convert, in order that my son's son will be permitted to enter into the congregation. Why all this rigmarole? Because the Torah prohibits Egyptian converts before the third generation to enter into the congregation, meaning to freely marry among the Jews. By Minyamin's observance of this prohibition, even during the time of Rabbi Akiva, which was about 2,000 years ago and more than 1,000 years after the Exodus from Egypt, this indicates that Egypt, during the time of the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishna, it was still viewed like the biblical Egypt. So rather, if anything was stated with regard to the delay of punishment, it was stated like this. Rav Chinana bar Papa says, the Holy One, blessed be He, does not punish a sinful king until his time to be banished. As it is stated, in full measure, when you send her away, you contend with her. So Amaymar teaches that statement of Rav Chinana bar Papa with regard to something else. Meaning, what is the meaning of that which is written in Malachi 3:6? Quote, for I, the Lord, change not, and you, sons of Jacob, are not consumed. What does this mean? For I, the Lord, change not. This is interpreted to mean I did not strike a nation and repeat striking it. Shaniti, right, the word for change, that the Lord does not change. And it says, I did not strike a nation and repeat it. That's the same word in Hebrew, shaniti. And did not repeat striking it, as a stricken nation never recovers from the initial strike. And you, sons of Jacob, are not consumed. This is interpreted to mean that despite the fact that I strike you many times for your sins, I do not let you perish. And this is the same as that which is written, Deuteronomy 32:23, I will heap evils upon them. I will consume my arrows upon them, which is interpreted to mean my arrows are consumed and used up, and they, the Jewish people, are not consumed, but will continue to endure despite the many calamities that will befall them. Right? It's an interesting legacy that the Jews were gifted from the Holy One above. Right? We were gifted the Torah. We were gifted the legacy of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Incredible, incredible gifts. But we're also held to this higher standard, right? The Jews are obligated in the 613 commandments spelled out in the Torah. And it doesn't matter that you never signed on the dotted line, I agree to do this. You're born into it. And because sadly, in every generation, there's so many Jews that don't adhere to the laws. So our sages understand that is why so many calamities befall the Jewish people in history. And that, this surus that we have in every generation, right? We just read in the Haggadah, Passover, in every generation, they rise up to destroy us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, delivers us from their midst. And it's like, if we don't remember that we have a relationship with God in heaven, well, then our enemies around us will remind us of that. And attack us and hurt us. And God willing, we'll cry out with a strong voice to God in heaven and renew our relationship with Him and move forward. And thank God there's always been a core of Jews that, never leave that relationship. And here we are, despite all these calamities that befell us in every generation, a very small nation, here we still are, thousands of years later. And so Maimar teaches, I'm sorry, where am I? So you're right, and yours. And this is the same as that which is written, I will heap evils upon them. I will consume my arrows upon them, which is interpreted to mean my arrows are consumed and used up, but they, the Jewish people, are not consumed. And Rav Hamnuna says, the Holy One, blessed be He, does not punish a person until his sa, the measure that is suitable for him, is filled. As it is stated, in the fullness of his sufficiency he shall be in straits. The hand of every one that is in misery shall come upon him. In other words, when the sufficient measure of sin has been reached, then trouble will overtake him, right? All the time we see that the wicked prosper and righteous people suffer. So how can we say that God has an accounting system where, there's going to be justice for all according to their deeds? And, generally the answer is that, well, we have a life in this world and a life in the world to come, a life in the world of souls. We are souls, we're eternal. There's more than enough time for everyone to be rewarded for all of their mitzvahs that they perform and to be held accountable for all of their transgressions that they also perform. But this idea here is sometimes we will see even in this world, that the wicked eventually are upended, right? And in the past few years, we've definitely seen some people who behave very, very badly, abusing other people, for years, for decades even, and getting away with it. But in the end, they didn't get away with it, and they were brought low. And I'm sure you can think of some recent examples of people who would, fit that description. So having mentioned Rav Chananah bar Papa, the Gemara quotes another of his interpretations. So Rav Chananah bar Papa interpreted a verse homiletically. What is the meaning of that which is written? Rejoice in the Lord, you righteous. Praise is comely for the upright. Nava Tehillah, from Psalm 33. So do not read the conclusion of the verse as praise is comely, Nava. Rather, read it as a house, Nave, of praise. This is referring to Moses and David, whose enemies did not rule over their achievements, as they each built a Nave, a house for the Lord, and this house remained in existence. How so? With regard to David, the citadel that housed his home and city was not destroyed. As it is written, her gates are sunk into the ground. As the gates of Jerusalem built by David were not destroyed by enemies, but sunk into the ground and were buried there. And this is also so with regard to Moses. As the master said, when the first temple was built, the tent of meeting was sequestered, including its boards, its clasps, and its bars, and its pillars, and its sockets. Right, the tabernacle that we carried around in the wilderness, right, when Moses led us for 40 years, what happened to it? Well, once we entered the promised land, that was the temple, right? It acted as the temple for hundreds of years. And only after about 400 years, when Solomon finally built the temple, did they retire the tabernacle. And when they retired it, they took it apart, and all of its pieces were housed in the tunnels underneath the Temple Mount. Perhaps it's still there. Right, when the first temple was built, the tent of meeting was sequestered, including its boards, clasps, its bars, and pillars, and sockets. And the Gemara asks, where is it sequestered? Rav Chisda says that Avimi says, beneath the tunnels of the sanctuary. Now the sages taught in a Baraisa in the Tosefta 4:16 through 19 that the Sota placed her eyes. Right, we're getting back to the Sota procedure briefly, and then we're going to digress again. The Sota placed her eyes, meaning fixed her gaze on one who is unfit for her, right? A man who's not her husband. And so this is her punishment. That which she desired, i.e. to be with her paramour, is not given to her, as she becomes forbidden to him forever. And that which she had, i.e. her husband, was taken away from her, as she is now forbidden to him as well. And this teaches that anyone who places his eyes on that which is not his or hers is not given what he desires, and that which he had is taken from him. Right? This is a fitting punishment for one who covets, right? If you're said, this is transgressing the 10th commandment. Coveting is desiring something that is not rightfully yours. And when you do that, you end up not getting the thing that you desired and losing that which you had, which should have made you content with what you had. Instead, you placed your eyes on something that wasn't fit for you, and you didn't get that, and you lost what you already had. And so too, now we're on 9b, we found with regard to the primeval snake who seduced Eve in the Garden of Eden. For the serpent placed his eyes on that which was unfit for him, as he wanted to marry Eve. Consequently, that which he desired was not given to him, and that which was in his possession was taken from him. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, this is God speaking, I initially said that the snake will be king over every domesticated animal and non-domesticated animal. But now that he has, led Eve astray, who in turn led Adam astray, but now he, the serpent, is cursed more than all the domesticated animals and all the non-domesticated animals of the field, as it is stated. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed from among all cattle and from among all beasts of the field. Upon your belly shall you go, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life. And what's interesting, I think, about that is that the serpent wasn't just, one of the animals. The serpent was the cleverest, right? I think it says that in the Torah. He's the cleverest of all. And with that cleverness, he was destined to be the king of the beasts. But he set his eyes on that which was not fit for him, and he ended up slithering around on his belly. Now, the Bryce explains the elements of this curse. I said that the snake will walk upright, and now he shall go on his belly. I said that his food will be the same as the food eaten by humans, but now he shall eat dust. The snake said, I will kill Adam and marry Eve, but now I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. And the Baraisa continues, and so we also found with regard to Cain, of the Cain and Abel story, who desired to inherit the whole world alone. And Korach, who desired the priesthood, and Balaam, who desired Balak's money, and Doeg, who was jealous of David, and Ahitophel, who was also jealous of David, and Gehazi, who took Naaman's money, and Absalom, who wanted the kingdom, and Adonijah, who also wanted the kingdom, and Uzziah, who wanted to be high priest, and Haman, who wanted to kill all the Jews. All of these people in the Bible place their eyes on that which is unfit for them, and consequently what they desired was not given to them, and what they had was taken from them. Now the Mishnah teaches about the Sota. Her transgression began with her thigh, right? She committed adultery, so the matter of her legs, and afterward with her stomach. Therefore the thigh is smitten first, and then the stomach. And the Gemara asks from where these matters derive. And this is when she drinks the bitter water, right? If she's guilty, if she actually committed adultery and drinks the bitter water, so it goes into her, and it says it causes, her belly to burst and her thigh to fall away. Right? So what does it say? Then the priest shall cause the woman. So from where these matters derived, i.e. that this is the order of punishment, right? She began her transgression with the thigh and afterward with her stomach. Therefore, the thigh is smitten first and then the stomach. From where these matters derived, i.e. that this is the order of punishment, if we say it is because it is written in the verse detailing the priest's curse to the Sota, Numbers 5:21, then the priest shall cause the woman to swear with the oath of cursing, and the priest shall say unto the woman, the Lord make you a curse and an oath among your people, when the Lord does make your thigh to fall away and your belly to swell. Meaning if she's guilty and she drinks the bitter water, this is how she's going to die. Her thigh will fall away and then her belly will burst, which indicates the sequence of her punishment. But isn't the opposite written in the verse describing what actually occurs to the guilty Sota? And her belly shall swell and her thigh shall fall away, right? So when the priest admonishes her, if you drink this water and you're guilty, this is what's going to happen, right? Your thigh will fall away and your belly will swell. But then the Torah goes on and says, and then she drinks the water, bitter water, and if she is guilty, well then her belly shall swell and her thigh shall fall away. So now the order of events has been switched. So which is it? So Abaye said an explanation. When the priest curses the woman, he first curses the thigh and then he curses the stomach. But when the bitter water evaluates her, it evaluates her along its way through the body. And the bitter water first enters the stomach and then reaches the thigh. So the Gemara asks, but in the verse detailing the curse, it is also written, and this water that causes the curse shall go into your bowels and will cause your belly to swell and your thigh to fall away. Numbers 5:22. And the Gemara answers, that verse teaches that the priest notifies her that the stomach will be affected first and then the thigh, so that one not cast aspersions on the bitter water, that it's not working just because it's taking a little extra time to work. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Right? Mishnah number 5 was, and by the measure that you measure others, so you will be measured. Here's Mishnah number 6, here in chapter 1. The Mishnah provides additional examples of people who were treated by heaven commensurate with their actions. This has nothing to do with the Sotah. It's just detailing more examples of people who were punished with a punishment that was fitting for their actions. Samson followed his eyes, right, to Delilah, the Philistine woman. Therefore, he was punished measure for measure, as the Philistines gouged out his eyes. As it is stated, and the Philistines laid hold on him and put out his eyes. Judges 16:21. Absalom, son of King David, was excessively proud of his hair, and therefore he was hanged by his hair. And furthermore, because he engaged in sexual intercourse with 10 of his father's concubines, therefore 10 spears were put, i.e. thrust into him, as it is stated, and 10 young men that bore Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and slew him. And because he stole 3 times, committing 3 thefts of people's hearts, the heart of his father, as he tricked them by saying that he was going to sacrifice offerings, the heart of the court, as he tricked them into following him, and the heart of the Jewish people, as it is stated, so Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Therefore 3 spears were embedded into his heart, as it is stated. Then said Joab, I may not tarry like this with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive. Remember, Absalom tried to take the throne away even while David was still alive, despite the fact that David had chosen Solomon to be his successor. Now the Mishnah continues, and the same is so with regard to the reward of good deeds, right? People are rewarded measure for their good deeds. Miriam, Moses' sister, waited for the baby Moses for 1 hour at the shore of the Nile, as it is stated, and his sister stood far off to know what would be done with the baby Moses that was placed in the river. Therefore, the Jewish people delayed their travels in the desert for 7 days to wait for her, when she was smitten with Saraas, in the matter where she was, sort of questioning Moses' relationship with his own wife, and Miriam, was talking with Aaron and other people about that, and so that's Lashon Hara, and the punishment usually associated with Lashon Hara is Saraas. So she became a Mitzorah, and she had to go through a purification, and while she was being purified, the camp stayed. They didn't move on where she would have had to walk on her own behind the procession. The camp stayed for the 7 days. There was no, picking up and moving. Now they only moved when, God's presence in the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night got up and moved. And that was the signal that the whole encampment would move. But God let the encampment rest, as it were, while Miriam was going through her purification. Now Joseph merited to bury his father, resulting in a display of great honor to his father Jacob, and there was none among his brothers greater than he in importance, for he was viceroy of Egypt, as it is stated, and Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph, and his brethren, and his father's house. Only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went with them both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. Who to us had a greater burial than Joseph, as it was none other than Moses who involved himself in transporting his coffin, right? Joseph arranged for Jacob to have a proper burial, not in Egypt, but to be taken back to the land of Israel and to be buried in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac are buried. That's what Jacob wanted. Joseph, who himself was the viceroy of Egypt and was such a great and important person in Egypt, there was no way the Egyptians were going to allow them to take Joseph and bury him in Israel at the time of Joseph's death. But Joseph adjured his children that when you leave Egypt, right, he had prophecy and foresaw the exodus that would happen some hundreds of years later. But he said, then when you leave, take my bones with you. And so who was it that personally took responsibility for bringing Joseph's bones to their final resting place? None other than Moses himself, right? So in return for Joseph preoccupying himself with giving Jacob a proper burial, Moses took care that Joseph would have that proper burial. Now Moses merited to be the only person involved in the transportation of Joseph's bones to be buried in the land of Israel. And there were none among the Jewish people greater than Moses, as it is stated, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. who had a greater burial than Moses being the guy who buries you, as no one involved himself in the burial other than God himself, as it is stated, and he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab over against Beth Peor, and no man knows of his sepulchre unto this day. And the Mishnah comments, not only with regard to Moses did the sages say that God takes part in his burial, but also with regard to all the righteous individuals, as it is stated, your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall gather you in. Now, Moses did not get buried in the land of Israel. We don't know. We don't know where Moses was buried. But what we do know is that because Moses himself took responsibility to bring Joseph to his final resting place, God himself took responsibility, God alone, for the burial of Moses. So that's a pretty distinguished burial that Moses had. Okay, that concludes Mishnah number 6. Here comes the Gemara. The sages taught in the Tosefta 3:15, Samson rebelled with his eyes, as it is stated. Then his father and his mother said to him, is there never a woman among the daughters of your brethren, or among all of my people, that you go out and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? Right? Samson was a Jew, right? And his parents were devout Jews who dedicated him to be a Nazir from the day he was born. But for whatever reason, he fixed his eyes not on his Jewish sisters, right? And the women, Jewish women, but rather on the Philistine women, and that frustrated his parents. And Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she is pleasant in my eyes. Therefore, the Philistines gouged out his eyes, as it is stated, the Philistines laid hold on him and put out his eyes, right? He might have been attracted to those Philistine women, but he shouldn't have followed his eyes. He should have followed his brain, which told him, you know what Jewish law is, a Jew should marry a Jew. He didn't do that, and in the end, his eyes were gouged out by the Philistines that he had pursued with his eyes. Now the Gemara asks, whoa, is that so? But isn't it written, but his father and his mother knew not that it was from the Lord, as he sought a subterfuge against the Philistines, indicating that Samson's searching for a Philistine wife was due to a divine mission, right? It was all to fulfill this divine purpose. And the Gemara answers, although God did plan the punishment of the Philistines, in any event, when he went, he followed his own inclination and did not act for the sake of heaven. Right? God is always orchestrating events in a macro way. So just because whatever you do is not going to undermine God's plans, for the world, doesn't mean that you're not making inappropriate choices when you do things that are sins, when you do things that are wrong. You have free will. You're able to do that. It might fit into God's plans because God could predict that, you or some people like you would do those things. But the bottom line is when we follow the evil inclination, we're held accountable. It is taught in a Baraisa, in the Tosefta, that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says his initial wrongdoing, Samson's initial wrongdoing, was in Gaza, and therefore he was smitten in Gaza. And the Gemara explains his initial wrongdoing was in Gaza, as it is written, Judges 16:1. And Samson went to Gaza and saw there a harlot, and he went in unto her. Therefore he was smitten in Gaza, as it is written, and the Philistines laid hold on him and put out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. And the Gemara asks, but isn't it written earlier, and Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines, indicating that his initial wrongdoing was in Timnah. And the Gemara answers, in any event, his initial wrongdoing was in Gaza, for at least he had married the woman in Timnah. For at least he had married the woman in Timnah. In Gaza, Samson never wed the woman, but only engaged in sexual intercourse with her. So the Gemara continues its discussion of Samson. And the verse states, and it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. It is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, even if she had not been called by the name Delilah, it would have been fitting that she be called Delilah. For she weakened, Dildalah, his strength. She weakened his heart, and she weakened his deeds, thereby decreasing his merits. And the Gemara explains, she weakened his strength, as it is written, and she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and had the 7 locks of his hair shaved off. The 7 locks of his head shaved off, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. Judges 16:19. She weakened his heart, as it is written. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up this once, for he has told me all his heart." She weakened his deeds, thereby decreasing his merits, as the divine presence left him, as it is written. And she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke out of his sleep and said, "I will go out as the other times and shake myself." But he knew not that the Lord was departed from him, right? He had confided in Delilah that his source of strength was the hair that he had never cut because he was a Nazir all his life. So she cut off the hair, and then that strength left him. And the verse states, and when Delilah saw, and the verse states, when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart. And the Gemara asks, from where did she know that this time he had told her the truth about the source of his strength, given that he had lied about it previously, and she didn't realize it then? And Rabbi Chanin says that Rav says words of truth are recognizable. And she felt that this time he was telling the truth. Abaye says differently. She knew about Samson being a righteous individual, that he would not express the name of heaven in vain. So once he said, and he told her all his heart, and said to her, "There has not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazir unto God from my mother's womb," she said, now he is certainly telling the truth, because he invoked God in telling his story, and that's how she realized that he was telling the truth. And the verse states, and it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, that his soul was vexed unto death. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of "and urged him"? How did she do so, right? Urging him to tell her what his secret is. And Rabbi Yitzchak of the school of Rabbi Ami says, at that moment, immediately before his completion of the act of intercourse, she slipped away from beneath him. And by doing this, she urged him to reveal his secret. And when the angel spoke to Samson's mother, he said, "Now therefore beware, I pray you, and drink no wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing." And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of any unclean thing? That term usually means non-kosher foods. But obviously she would not eat them anyway. And what's more, until now, was she eating unclean things that she should have to be warned not to continue doing so? And Rabbi Yitzchak of the school of Rabbi Ami says the angel was not referring to foods that are actually unclean, not kosher, but rather items that are forbidden to a Nazir, right? Meaning that Samson would not consume any product of the grapevine his whole life. Now, after Samson smote 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass, he called a donkey. He called the place Lehi. Lehi. And God miraculously granted him to drink as he was dying of thirst. And the verse states, but God cleaved the hollow place that is in Lehi, and out of there came water. And when he had drunk, his spirit came back and he revived. Judges 15:19. So Rabbi Yitzchak of the school of Rabbi Ami says he desired something unclean, as he was driven by lust for Philistine women. Therefore, the saving of his life was dependent on something unclean, the jawbone of a donkey, right? An animal that we don't eat. The verse states with regard to Samson, and the Spirit of the Lord began, Vatachel, to move him in Mahanadan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. And Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says the prophecy of Jacob our father concerning the tribe of Dan took effect, Chaleta, through Samson, a member of the tribe of Dan. As it is written, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path, that bites the horse's heels so that the rider falls backwards. Genesis 49:17. I'm almost done. If you have questions or comments, get them in now. Now the verse continues, to move him, lefa amo, in Mahanadan. So Rabbi Yitzchak of the school of Rabbi Ami says this teaches that the divine presence jangled before him, inspiring him like a bell, zog, as it is written here, to move him, lefa amo, in Mahanadan, and it is written there with regard to the clothing of the high priest, a bell, pa'amon, and a pomegranate, Exodus 39:26. And so the verse concludes, between Zorah and Eshtaol. Rabbi Asi says Zorah and Eshtaol were two large mountains, and Samson uprooted them and ground them one against the other.
Samson's parents were told, "For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazir unto God from the womb. And he shall begin to save Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." Right? He was born in a time when the Philistines had the upper hand over the children of Israel. And Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says Samson's parents were being told that the oath of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, was negated, as it is written that Abimelech said to our forefather Abraham, "Now therefore swear unto me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto you, you shall do to me, and to the land wherein you have sojourned." Genesis 21:23. And the oath of the descendants of Abraham was no longer binding, since the Philistines broke their oath by subjugating the Jewish people. That's where we're going to leave off. And tomorrow, with God's help, we'll continue at a special time, right? Because last days of Passover begin tomorrow night. So we're going to have our AT Daily tomorrow, a little bit unusual time. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Tomorrow's class is 1 p.m. Pacific. Not like the Friday class that we usually do at noon Pacific. Special time tomorrow, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And we will continue learning about Samson and the Philistines and a bunch of other of these kind of legendary narrative, beautiful dramatic narrative type teachings. Tomorrow's daf is even more exciting than today's. Okay, let's go to questions and comments on Sota, page 9. Second. Come on, Google Doc. Load. Jonathan, it seems to me the concept of measure for measure has many proof texts and examples. However, it isn't so obvious that it is a law that can be accepted without being an article of faith. It is something to accept without the faith. Right? No, it is absolutely an article of faith. Right? We do not see evidence that everyone is rewarded or punished measure for measure in this world. We don't know exactly what it looks like in the world to come. We have a very rich tradition about the world to come. And the world to come sort of has two meanings, right? One is the resurrection of the dead that will happen when the Messiah comes, but it also is Gan Eden, or the world of souls, right? So we are souls. We come from the world of souls. We'll return to the world of souls. And there's this concept that there will be a time of refinement to sort of, deal with the accountability for all our misdeeds in this world. And we'll have to spend some time in Gehenna, right? A kind of purging of those sins, but it's a temporary stay when we leave this world before we can assume our rightful place in the world to come. And the world to come, the world of souls, in that sense, it's not any kind of binary place. Gehenna is sort of like hell, but it's not permanent. And then when you get into what we, might loosely call heaven, heaven is a place with an infinite number of levels, right? So it's not that you're just there and you're the same paradise as everyone else, but according to the way you lived your life and the amount that you learned and the deeds that you did, then they find you the suitable neighborhood for you and a suitable reward for you in the infinite strata of the world of souls. And it is definitely an article of faith that God will reward measure for measure and punish measure for measure, but we won't see that until we leave the earthly realm, until our souls depart from the earthly realm. Bill, regarding the serpent, what a fascinating exegesis. And yes, Genesis does describe the serpent as the wisest and most subtle of all the beasts, right? And so the serpent was destined to be the king of the beasts. But he set his eyes on that which was not fit for him and ended up slithering on his belly. Let us, God gives us so many gifts. There's so many things that are appropriate for us to wish to do, right? We We should covet greater learning, right? We should cover greater deeds of charity. We can covet for ourselves that we should perform greater and greater, deeds of Torah learning, charity, devotion, treating our families well, making peace. Those are the things we want to aspire to do, because that's always going to be appropriate for us. But to covet that which was not meant for us, we'll end up not getting it and depriving ourselves of the gifts that were intended for us, as we learned today. Today's daf was dedicated in loving memory to our friend Seth Glass. May the neshama have a great aliyah in the world of souls. Seth touched so many lives with his music and his teachings and his friendship. And I know that he's going to a very, very high place indeed in the world of souls. And may our learning today bring him up even just a little bit higher. All the best, my friends, and see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific. And we publish the holiday schedule, so you can find that on the Facebook page or in the email. You should always be subscribed to the email bulletin that we send out every week. And you can subscribe to that at accidentaltalmudist.org. Have a great night.